Hi, everyone. We are about to get started. So if you can all move to the side of the room, that would be appreciated. Okay. We have a few more seats, so just make your way through.
There's some seats in the front. Y'all can come on in. Come right on in.
Okay, one more minute for everybody to make your way through. We have a few more seats, so if you can trickle in, fill up the seats, and then we can get started. Okay, yeah? Okay, awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the DMZ and to today's event. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And of course, for those of you who haven't met me yet, just a quick intro. My name is Tina, and I lead on partnerships for the Black Innovation Program. And the Black Innovation Program really is dedicated towards creating a more equitable ecosystem for Black founders. So if you have questions about what we do, feel free to connect with me, connect with my colleagues. They're out here in the room, so we're here to answer whatever questions you might have. And for those of you who are new to the DMZ, and for those who are not new but maybe don't exactly know what the DMZ does, we are a world-leading incubator for tech startups around the world. We help founders build great businesses by connecting them to capital, customers, experts, and of course, more importantly, connecting them to a community of like-minded entrepreneurs as well. And I should say that we would not do all of this work without the support of our sponsors. So really just wanted to highlight a few of them here. The list is not exhaustive, but it's really, really important work, and we wouldn't be able to do them without our sponsors. So, are we excited for today's event? Are we? Okay, great. Great, I'm excited. So the event really is about, as the title insinuates, it's about amplifying Black women in tech. And really thinking around, what are the challenges that Black women experience, what are the opportunities that exist for Black women in tech, and how do we really bridge a lot of those equity gaps that exist. In terms of the programming today, we will have a fireside chat, as well as a founder-funder panel. So really excited for those. You get to meet our speakers, panelists, when we're at that point in the program. But as always, when we start a lot of our events, we have to do a land acknowledgement, right? Because we are on ceded territory. So I would like to start this event by acknowledging that Toronto is in the District 1 Spoon territory. The District 1 Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them together to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So 2 housekeeping rules. If you are at any point looking for the washroom, just further down the hall, on your right for women and on your left for men. The other housekeeping rule, if you do have questions during the fireside chat or during the panel, just wait till the end. You will have ample time to ask your questions, to engage. That's why we're here. So let's jump into it with the first agenda for today. Oh, I'm going backwards. Awesome. So let's get started with the first program, which is our Fireside Chat. And of course, really excited to introduce Regina, who is going to be leading that. And just a little bit about Regina. I'm going to read here just so that, she has a very overwhelming, very impressive bio, but I want to do it justice. So just a bit about her. Regina is the co-founder of Black Women Talk Tech. The organization aims to identify, support, and encourage Black women to build the next billion-dollar businesses. Black Women Talk Tech is the largest collective of Black women tech founders that brings a unique understanding of the challenges Black women face, as well as the advantages that they offer to the tech industry. As co-founder, Regina co-leads on business strategy, strategic partnerships, as well as sponsor relations. She also launched her tech startup in 2014 with Tres Noir, a platform that empowers women of color to celebrate their textured hair with a personalized beauty routine that works. It's virtual beauty coach, takes the guesswork out of finding the right natural hair products and services by matching your individual hair profiles to a beauty regimen that works for you. Regina has also been named one of the 100 most powerful women by Entrepreneur Magazine and top 10 women in tech by Essence Magazine. Her features include BET Her, Black Enterprise, Wall Street Journal, Crane's Business, and more. She's on the Cabinet for Black Entrepreneurship in the City of New York and a Women.NYC advisor, along with a former board member of Rising Tide Capital, which is an entrepreneurial development program based in Jersey City, New Jersey. She also loves to travel, which I love. She loves to dance, and she loves to watch football. So let's welcome her to the stage.
Test, can you hear me? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to have a transparent and frank conversation tonight about amplifying the stories of Black women tech entrepreneurs and Black women funders. This is no small feat to explore and capitalize on opportunities within the tech ecosystem. We're not here to talk about the problems, right? We are here to talk about the solutions. We don't want to sit here and say, oh, woe is me. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, there's all these problems, so on and so forth. Listen, we know there's problems. And yet, women of color are still breaking barriers. Women of color are building and innovating startups globally. We've been building our community in the US for over 7 years now, and we are so excited to see how the tech ecosystem has continued to evolve in Canada. And so we've had conversations with executives in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Montreal, in Waterloo. And so Toronto, of course, is definitely the place where we really want to start to build and put some roots down. So again, we're excited to have this first conversation, hopefully one of many with the DMZ, around thinking about how we can focus on solutions. But I'd be remiss if I didn't really underscore how serious the problems are. According to Crunchbase, Black men and women entrepreneurs receive less than 2% of all VC funds every year. And Black women specifically receive 0.35%. That's not even a percent of venture capital funding in the US. Before 2021, only 93 Black female founders had raised over $1 million, and you will meet one of those founders this evening. But how much venture capital is invested every year? When you hear this less than 2% and 0.35%, like these numbers are so small. $216 billion is invested in venture capital every year. So Black folk only get less than 2% of $216 billion, okay? So when we talk about like how woefully underfunded a startup can be, these are the numbers that we're talking about. And then when we think about the venture capital market, right, for those that want to start a fund, for those that want to say, okay, I'm going to be the decision maker that actually invests in these startups, Black investors only make up 4% of that $216 billion market. This number is even lower for Black women, who constitute just 1% of the US venture community. And overall, only 3% of Black investors hold key decision-making roles, like partner or GP, at these venture capital firms. Black fund managers are still raising smaller funds. The overall number of first-time Black fund managers is growing, with 28.6% of fund managers launching their first fund last year. Yet fund managers that are raising end up raising 35% less than what they originally intended. So there's challenges and pressures on both sides, from being a funder and wanting to get this more access to the capital, more access to capital to these to the founders, as well as the founders being able to get this access as well. But again, we are not here to dwell on the problems. Black Women Talk Tech will always focus on the solutions. We've got to focus our time, our money, and our resources towards amplifying the stories of Black women in tech. Sorry, one last thing I want to say. Okay, great. So we are actually here to dive into a powerful conversation and a powerful story of Black girl magic. And with that, I'd love to introduce and bring to the stage Erica Pleiby, the founder of MedHall. Grab the mic right there behind you. All right, let's have a chat. So, good evening, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. Tell everyone, well, let's just start off with just introducing yourself. Tell us a little about your story and tell us about MedHall.
Yeah, sure. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, DMZ, for sponsoring and hosting this event tonight, as well as Black Women Talk Tech. I'm Erica Pleiby. I'm the founder and CEO of MedHall, which is a digital platform that helps healthcare providers find and book transportation for patients with complex needs. So this means hospitals, insurance companies, which you guys don't have to worry about as much in Canada, and even pharma companies need to book transportation for patients to get to their appointments. So people who may have cancer and need to go to the doctor for chemo, or people who need to go to dialysis 3 times a week, many times those patients don't have access to the appropriate transportation, and they miss those appointments, which can be detrimental to their health. But then on the flip side of that, healthcare providers lose money when patients don't show up to their doctor's appointments. And so we were founded in 2017. And we launched in 2019, we formally launched in 2019. And so we're excited to be here today. We are venture backed. As Regina shared, I've raised about $3 million to date from a mix of investors, institutional investors like Morgan Stanley, Citibank, Google, and a few other social impact and healthcare focused investors as well. We're headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, where FedEx is headquartered, if anybody knows what FedEx is. No, we're headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee with FedEx, and we operate in about 14 states in the US, and so excited to be here.
Awesome. So tell us about how you started, thinking back to like when you were first creating the idea that is MedHall. What was kind of the impetus behind that, and how did you actually say, okay, this is the startup that I'm going to create?
So I started MedHall for 2 reasons. One, my background is in clinical and research informatics. So I spent most of my career building software for hospitals, clinical research organizations, mostly like electronic medical records, lab, pharmacy information systems, clinical research information systems. And so I've always been obsessed with using technology to make healthcare a lot easier. Not sure if we were doing a good job or not, but that was always the goal. That was always what I was very passionate about. But personally, my grandmother was a type 2 diabetic double leg amputee. and my family struggled tremendously with getting her to all of her doctor's appointments. I remember calling to one of her doctor's offices and like asking, is there any way like somebody can come pick her up? Because my mom was my grandmother's primary transporter, but my mom is a full-time teacher. So having, you know, to take off work and pick my grandmother up, put her in the vehicle. And I used to see these like little vans that were wheelchair accessible. I'm like, can she ride one of those? But I could never get any clear answers. The process was just so obscure. And so a few years later, because we dealt with this problem for about 10 years in our family. But then a few years later, while I was working at a very large hospital in Tennessee, I got an email haphazardly that from a department within the hospital that share all of these like problems this department was having with patient transportation. Like they were having trouble scheduling rides for patients. They were having trouble finding high quality transportation providers that could provide wheelchair transportation. I'm like, my grandma, like this could have been something that would have helped my grandma. Like we were having these issues as our, you know, just in our family. But at the time I thought, you know, this is just the problem my family is having. Everybody else's family got this figured out. This is not a problem anywhere else in the country, just us. But then once I got that email, it was really validating for me. So I actually reached out to the person. I said, hey, this email wasn't supposed to come to me, but I read it. But can I come and like learn more about this problem? Like I'm very intrigued by this. And so I did that. I went over to that department, learned more about the challenges they were having, looked at their process for booking transportation. It was just so inefficient. They were spending like 2.5 hours of their day calling around, finding transportation providers for their patients. A lot of the transportation providers weren't showing up, or they were showing up very late, which was still ineffective for them. And so I thought, there is a way, a fairly easy way that a piece of technology should be able to fix a lot of the challenges that they were having. And so that was what I started to, I guess, brainstorm in my head. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur, though. Never.
Really?
My dad, ever.
What?
No.
Why not?
My dad he's a small business entrepreneur. He's a mechanical engineer by training. And when he came to the States from Liberia, he came to build printing presses, and then he also started running printing shops. And he was just so stressed out. Like, I just remember him from like the time I could see, I just remember him being so stressed out all the time. And so whenever I thought of entrepreneurship, I thought about stress. That was it. Like, so I never want that. It legit never crossed my mind to be an entrepreneur. So when I started thinking of this idea, I was like, oh, I'll build this small initiative for Memphis, and then they can take it and run off with it, and then I'll just, you know, keep doing what I was doing. And that didn't happen because as I started to build this out for Memphis, I started getting connected to other healthcare administrators, like CEOs of hospitals across the country. And they were saying, well, we're having issues with transportation too. Well, we are too. You know, all of these cancer centers and dialysis centers, nursing homes. And so I'm like, well, this is actually a bigger problem than I thought. And so in 2017, I decided to found the company, and that was
it.
Yeah. And I'm an entrepreneur.
There you are. So it's so interesting when we think about how we discover pain points, right? You know, how we think about a pain point that you experienced personally, but that the market was huge. Tell us like how, you know, having looked at now the full, you know, total addressable market, like how big is this market?
The total addressable market just in the U.S. for medical transportation is over $107 billion. So.
Say that again.
$107 billion.
Okay, all right. So when we think about how technology, you know, the beautiful part about startups, right? The beautiful part about technology businesses is that you're using a product to solve a $1 billion problem, a $1 trillion problem. And this allows us to create $1 billion and $1 trillion value for our companies. And listen, you know, there's all types of small businesses, there's all types of entrepreneurs, but I do think that it's so important for us to think about technology to leapfrog some of our challenges that we have with building wealth in our communities. So tell us about the fundraising journey. You mentioned, you know, you've raised a bit. And that, I'm sure, has been no small feat. You know, tell us some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that you found and you experienced in your fundraising journey.
Yeah. So I am the type of person that if I don't understand something, I try to do as much research about it as possible. And so through my research in preparation for fundraising, I saw a lot of the stats that you mentioned earlier about Black women. At that time, Black women were only raising, it was like 0.004. You remember that number? It was basically 0%, right. So nothing. And so I thought, I don't let things like that get me down. I just try to figure out like, okay, I won't go that route right now. Let me figure out something else. So I knew it would be very difficult, or at least I thought it would be very difficult for me to try to go out and raise money without having any traction. I was a solo founder. I'm based in Memphis, Tennessee, so I'm not in New York, San Francisco, Boston, which is where most venture-backed founders are. Also didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. So like all the things I didn't check off. So I was like, well,
you see her here today, right? Okay.
So I was like, I know I can do this, but let me just go a different route. In addition to that, when we raise venture capital, we also have to think about the fact that we're giving up equity in our companies. And I still had so much to learn in the early days. And I didn't want to give up equity and raise all this money when I didn't know exactly why I was raising it. So that was another reason why I held off my fundraise for about 2 years. And so I did a few small accelerators, and we got like $70,000 from those accelerators. So FedEx has had a logistics accelerator as well as a local startup accelerator in Memphis. So I literally stretched that $70,000 over 2 years. I built our first version of our platform. I recruited about 30 transportation providers in our transportation network. I brought on like a half of an employee. So, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Like
a third, bring on a third of an employee, do what you got to do.
You have to. And so with that, I was able to get 2 paid pilots and my first paid customer, just with that. And so I used that traction to then go out and raise my seed round. I didn't do pre-seed, I did seed. And so I positioned myself in such a way that people could not tell me no, because I wanted to make sure I checked off, if I couldn't check off all the other like metrics or personal things about myself, like being in Boston or San Francisco, Ivy League, whatever, I could at least check off that I had X number of customers, X number of validation, X number of revenue already, which was more than what a lot of founders had at that stage. And so that's what I did. So my first round I started off at 1.2, and then I eventually raised a seed extension and raised another like 1.7, 1.8. But like I was just sharing with them earlier, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, even with all the research I had done, I was woefully underprepared, because a lot of the accelerators that I had done, they prepare you to pitch, but they don't prepare you for what happens after like an investor says yes. So if you get into a meeting, you get through this, these meetings with the investors, and they say, okay, great, I wanna invest. Like we're in for $200K. And I'm like, okay, great. You don't give me any money, and they're like, we'll send over the documents. And I was like, okay, I'm playing it cool. Send over the documents and, we'll get things started. I email my lawyer and I'm like, what documents are they talking about?
Data room.
Like, what are they talking about? And he's like, your purchase agreement. I was like, what is that? I didn't know anything about the legal process for raising. And so when we don't know those things on the back end, that also makes investors lose confidence in us, and founders that look like us, to be frank, if we want to be honest about it. So I think that also extended the amount, well, not I think, I know that also extended the amount of time that it took me to raise. And so that was actually a big barrier in my fundraising process, was that lack of knowledge. And I now like heavily educate accelerator programs. Like, okay, it's great to teach founders how to pitch, but at least set them up for success so that they can get through these other processes, because you don't want them to have this big block. Because during that time when you're trying to go figure it out and go learn these things, investors can come back and say, actually, you know what, Erica? We're actually going to hold off on the investment. We don't want to, and that has happened to a lot of friends of mine.
Absolutely.
And it happens all the time. Definitely. And so you want to be able to move pretty quickly through the process. So I think that was the biggest barrier for me in the fundraising journey. What was kind of a highlight for me in the fundraising journey, after I got my, it took me 2 no's with an investor to get my term sheet. On the 3rd time I went to them, they gave me a term sheet. The first time they were just like, you're not ready, you still have your full-time job, which I believe in keeping a full-time job because people will have you out here homeless. He was like, you still have your full-time job. I don't think you know enough about the market or, whatever. So then I came back again and he said, no, like we're still not convinced. And then I came back again. I had these two letters of intent. I didn't have the first customer yet. These 2 letters of intent and then one letter of intent and then these 2 paid pilots. And then we finally got our term sheet, and that was like fuel for me. But what really, really catalyzed our round was getting investment from Morgan Stanley. And so I applied for a program in New York that actually one of your founders, who I met yesterday randomly, DeRace Rose, I met him just randomly last night at the Morgan Stanley dinner. But I did that program about 4 years ago, and that really helped not only boost my confidence and knowledge, but it also boosted my credibility as well and helped the rest of my fundraise go pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. There's a lot of gems here, right? So thinking about the profile of what a founder looks like, Erica's really laid out the idea that you have to be in New York, Silicon Valley, Boston, San Francisco, right? Is she? No. Having a full-time job, that's actually par for the course for a lot of Black women entrepreneurs. They are still working full-time. Why? Because they are bootstrapping their businesses. Why? Because they don't get access to capital. Right? So there's reasons for why we're connecting the dots here, and yet it is still possible, right? And thinking about at what step do you want to take venture funding? At what step does it make sense for your business? And it could very well be that venture isn't for you at all, and that's okay too. I think we get very caught up in venture being so sexy and, oh my God, if you're not venture backed, that means something. That does not mean anything. It just means that you might have made different choices. You just went through like all these awesome things. So one thing I'm going to also just note is we're going to get into a very quick Q&A and before we move on to the next conversation. So if some folks have questions, get them ready. I'm going to talk to Erica like a little while longer and then we're going to go into Q&A, okay? All right, so what advice do you have for other Black entrepreneurs who are just now starting? They're just now getting into building their technical requirements, your user requirements, you're building your MVP for your tech startup?
So the first thing that I would say is making sure that you're talking to whoever your potential customers or users are. Like we're the technology platform. We don't own any vehicles. We build networks of specialty transportation companies. These are small businesses. They own anywhere from like 2 vans that are wheelchair accessible all the way to like companies who own 200-300 vans. And so I spent a year and a half just solely talking to them, talking to people that work in hospitals that we would be selling to, just to really understand what their pain points actually are. Because of my work before this, I had seen so many technology companies just start building things. Even large corporations do it too. They just start building things because they think they know what the customers want, and they're not exactly sure what they want. So I would definitely say spending the time before you even start building, because the MVP doesn't actually have to be like a piece of technology or a piece of hardware. An MVP could be like data that you have in an Excel spreadsheet. It could be like a Google form that you created and you get feedback from your potential customers. So that's the first thing I would say, really making sure that your focus is not funding, but your focus is customers and potential revenue. And that's always been I've been very, very particular about that. Whenever I talk to any investors, anybody, they always know that customers, like they are our focus. That's our main focus, customers and revenue. They are the priority, not investors. So I would definitely say that. Another huge piece of advice that was my favorite piece of advice that was given to me was that 90% of advice is BS. And there's actually this article that's called 90% of advice is crap, how to build your next startup or something like that. If you Google that, you'll be able to find it. But it was written in 2015 by Nat Turner. Nat Turner was the founder of Flatiron Health, which was a startup I used to work for. Flatiron got acquired for $2 billion. by a pharma company called Roche, but it's one of my favorite startup articles because it talks about how we receive so much advice from so many people. It could be somebody down off the street, somebody like your mom, a random investor. Everybody is giving you advice on your company. And one of the biggest roles I feel like for us as founders and CEOs is really to decipher, pick through that advice to figure out what to take and what to leave. And we don't have to say like, oh, I'm not taking that advice or I'm not leaving it. We can just say, okay, thank you for your advice. I always tell people, thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your advice. But we also have to be mindful of not getting too distracted. And I know it's great to participate in programs. I've done literally 14 accelerator programs, y'all, like a lot. I don't recommend it. But I did that because, for one, I didn't know any better in the earlier days. But with that, you can get so much advice, and you do have to be mindful of how much advice and what types of advice you're taking. So that is probably my second piece. And my last thing is that our time is our most valuable resource. I think one thing that I see a lot with founders of color is that we end up trying to do too many things ourselves, and we waste so much time. Instead of paying, so even if it's something that we could spend like $400 or $500 on and somebody can get it done in a week, we're like, nope, we gotta save that money, we gotta scrape, but it'll take us 4 months to do it, and we won't even do it that well because it's not our expertise. So time is your most valuable asset, so definitely remember that.
Love that. Last question, and then again, if anyone has we're only gonna take 2 questions from the audience, but last question, how do you balance this with life and self-care and outside of being an entrepreneur and outside of being, a tech founder? You're a mom, you are a wife, you are all these other things. So, we all wear so many different hats. How do you manage all these hats?
Yeah. It was hard. And I would say actually up until 2021, I was not doing that good of a job. I was like, my whole life revolved around my company, and then whatever scraps I had left, that's what I gave to everybody else. And that literally, no, I'm telling the truth. But that came to a head very quickly. And I'm still now trying to rebuild a lot of the things that were broken. And I always say that it takes a long time to build certain relationships or build up good health or whatever it is, but it's very easy to break those relationships, or it's very easy to lose good health. And that is what happened to me. That's what happened to a lot of my friends. And so at the end of 2021, I became very, very intentional about prioritizing relationships that mean a lot to me, whether those were my best friends, obviously my husband, my mom, my son, and also things that I like to do. I prioritize those things, and then I kind of build my schedule and my priorities for MedHall around that. And honestly, that has worked out a lot better, because when we show up in these meetings, whether it's with customers or investors, they can feel how raggedy we are. And I'm just being honest about it. They can see when we're exhausted, they can see when we're depleted. But when we show up and we're joyful, when we're glowing, when we're excited, when we're happy, when we look healthy, when we feel healthy, the company is still healthy. I heard someone say, and I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was Julia Collins. I love Julia. Yeah, I think it was Julia Collins. She was the first Black female unicorn. She said, your organization will only be as healthy as you are. And I just, when she said that, that really stuck with me. And it's true, and I believed it. So so there is no balance, more of a harmony.
Yep.
So
I love it. Questions, comments from the audience? Yes.
So,
Can you? Oh.
So you talked about not knowing what to do after the pitch, and about how investors were losing confidence in you because of that. So I'm just wondering, for founders, how could they educate themselves about all those aspects? Any advice you'd like to give?
Yeah. So I will go if you are an accelerator or have access to an accelerator point, and then if you don't, then talk about that route as well. So if you are a part of an accelerator, or if there's anybody that runs an accelerator, asking explicitly for, is there a place in the curriculum where we can talk about fundraising documents or the legal documents. So let's walk through a term sheet, help us understand what a term sheet looks like. There are term sheets that you can, like basic term sheets that you can find on the internet. So if you Google like YC, which is Y Combinator, YC term sheet, or just in general, like a seed stage term sheet example, you'll be able to find articles that can explain what those things mean to you. And even though it is as simple as doing that, I just didn't even think to do that like back then, because I didn't even understand anything that happened after an investor said yes. So that's the first thing that I would do, understanding a term sheet, because your terms set how much equity you're giving away. The second thing that you can also do is, the same thing, look up purchase agreements. So purchase agreements or convertible note documents, and making sure that you read those, understand those, and what you don't understand, taking them to, if you are already incorporated and have an attorney, asking your attorney to walk you through some of the basic things that you should for sure understand, or if you are a part of an accelerator or startup program, bringing those to advisors or leads over the program to ensure that they can help you understand those documents.
One other quick thing is just for those that are not fully finance majors, bookkeepers, that's if I think about the thing that I wish I would have spent $500
Yes.
on, or, an extra $1,000, keep your financial books in order. If you want any sort of outside funding, someone's going to want to see your financial documents. They need to be in order. Your 3 financial statements, your balance sheet, your P&L, and your, what is the third one? Cash flow statement, right? So making sure you have access to those at any point in time. If you actually have a cap table, making sure that cap table is updated, and creating, just a Google folder that has, those things in it that you can link and send to an investor whenever they're asking for it, right? So to Erica's point, people lose deals. Just because you get an instant yes, or if you get a yes, does not mean it stays yes. It's a yes when the check hits the account. That's when it's a yes. Other questions, comments?
Yes, I had a quick question. First of all, you're a great storyteller. I love that. But my question was around building a team. You talked about having a half of an employee. I've definitely been through that route. I once had an intern ghost on me completely, no fallback, nothing. So just wanted to ask about advice around building a team, when to do it, because I relate to the I'll do it myself type of mantra. So when to do it, and then how to do it effectively.
I would say when to do it is when you, when you're starting to get stretched thin, or if you start to see things coming up that you aren't necessarily an expert at or have really good expertise in. I am always in the mind of like bringing on contractors, not hiring like full-time employees immediately. One of the websites that I use that I love so much is Upwork. Like I've used Upwork since like day one, and they are not paying me. They can pay me, but I'm telling you, like we still have a small team. We're a team of 14 now, full-time, but 6 of my employees started as like Upwork contractors, and I just brought them on full-time. But I really love Upwork. I love the idea of contracting first with folks just so that you can see how they work. But I love Upwork because you can get folks who have that very specific expertise. You can see their ratings from other customers that they've worked with. And for those who don't know, Upwork is a freelance site. They have freelancers that can do pretty much everything from like social media to financials to just general project management, operations, customer success, customer support, developers, everything. So I really, really enjoyed, I really love Upwork, and that was what helped me scale my team in the beginning. I always think about having people around me who are much smarter than me. I only want people around me who are smarter than me, because I mean, other than that, why am I paying them? Just doesn't make any sense. So for me, once I started seeing areas where I was weak, I literally started writing them down. Like, here are the areas that I am weak. and then started building roles around that. And so when I built my first role, my first full-time role was a COO, chief operating officer. And then I also brought on a fractional person who was like my first customer support person. That was the like one third of a person. But so yeah, that's how I think about building out a team, finding areas where I have gaps. And the tool that I used specifically was Upwork. I also leveraged my network as well. So prior to this, I was in several different healthcare executive organizations, and my COO actually came from one of those organizations. I was on a board with her. I just loved her work ethic, and I was like, hey, if I ever build a team one day, at this time I was thinking I would be CIO of a hospital one day. I wasn't thinking I would build my own company because I didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but I was like, I want her on my team one day. Whatever that team is, and then I eventually brought her in as COO. So.
Thank you so. Oh dear. So let's hold those questions till the end, and we will definitely get to everyone. But in the essence of time, we definitely want to make sure that we can have the next conversation. Thank you so much for sitting and listening with us. Okay, and I'm going to hand it off now back to Tina.
Was that amazing, or was that amazing? Let's applaud that. So I think there are a few nuggets there for some of us to reflect on as we continue our journey, thinking about how do we grow our businesses, from hiring, fundraising, product development, and so forth. So thank you, Regina, for leading that, and thank you, Erica, for sharing so candidly your experience with the rest of us. So we are... Okay, yeah. Let's applaud that. We are going to move on to the next part of the programming, which is the panel conversation. And I will introduce our panelists, starting with Giselle. Giselle is the founder and general partner. There she goes. She is a founder and general partner at Matter Ventures, which is a VC fund investing in diverse founders who are building deep tech ventures. So that includes machine learning, AI, edge computing, big data, and computer vision. She's a CEO at Niche Studio, where she leads a team of engineers, design ninjas, building custom software artificial intelligence systems for Fortune 1000 and innovative organizations. She's a Techstar mentor, as well as a Forbes Finance Council thought leader. So if you can sit up there, that would be great. Awesome. So next up, I will call Brenda to the stage. So Brenda is a visionary founder and CEO of My Well Self, which is a digital health solution committed to improving productivity and health satisfaction through guided health evaluations and personalized health prevention strategies. The company uses data insights to help expedite access to personalized preventative wellness treatment and measures improvements over time. She's a two-time founder within the healthcare space and previous founder and CEO of a clinical trial patient referral firm. After working in research and development space for over 17 years of her career, personal health issues drove the inspiration for My Well Self, with Brenda identifying the barriers in accessing preventative wellness-based therapies. Come on stage, girl. Okay. Next up, I would love to call Melissa Allen. Prior to her venture capital career, Melissa Allen was an award-winning wealth manager who built up to $30 million in assets under management at Desjardins. Before Desjardins, she worked in tech sales and marketing at companies such as Toystar and Google. Currently, along with managing the VC fund Capital M, she's also executive director at League of Innovator Accelerator and is also a venture partner at LOI Ventures. Perfect. And last, Ehi. So Ehi is an intensely curious innovator. with a passion for understanding and solving life's challenges. A participant in the IBM Design Thinking Lab, semi-finalist in the 2019 Amazon-sponsored Kellogg Design Challenge. She's delivered successful design-led projects in financial services, agribusiness, and e-commerce for over a decade. She's currently the founder and CEO of Anuncio, which is a startup with a vision to decentralize access to opportunities for career growth and success for students and early career professionals as well, irrespective of their backgrounds. Anuncio leverages AI to empower individuals with tools to discover their strengths, build fulfilling careers at any point in their journey, and make a living doing what they love. So Ehi, up on stage. Okay. So I think I would just ask my questions from here. How are we doing today?
Amazing.
Yeah? Are we energized?
Let's go.
Perfect.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, right?
Perfect.
3 espressos. Yeah.
Great. So my first question goes to all the panelists. Can each of you describe to us the moment that led you to this journey of entrepreneurship, to your current venture specifically, and how this journey has been going till date? So we can start with you.
Yeah,
Yeah?
of course. So, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, but if we're just to focus on the fund, Matter Ventures. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So I've been an entrepreneur all my life, but if we're just to focus on the fund that I'm still building now, it's actually not so much a business story, it's like a life story. So I've been planning, it's almost 10 years now. I knew that I would launch a fund at some point. I also knew the cost of launching a fund. So I literally wrote down, I've got a book where I chart a bunch of stuff, but I literally wrote down the amount of money that I would need to put aside to launch a fund. And as life goes, life never goes the way you plan, right? So when the murder of George Floyd happened, it was interesting because, interesting, not good interesting. I literally walked around the house for 4 days, angry, like literally angry. And it was kind of anger, I just couldn't shake that anger. But my grandmother, like she taught me, she literally brought me up to be an alchemist, which I consider myself to be an alchemist. And so I know that carrying that is not good, doesn't serve me, doesn't serve the people around me. Like, it's just not a good emotion to have. And so for me, I remember I was walking down the stairs in my loft. Before I hit the bottom of the stairs, I was like, I need to launch this fund now. And that's literally how it happened. And that was the thought of it anyway, before I started fundraising and structuring it, was in 2021. So that's how it came to be. Yeah.
Amazing.
Story. The question was, repeat again?
Yeah, so your journey to date, what's that specific moment that led you to wanting to start this venture?
Okay, so I'm Brenda, founder of My Well Self. So Tina gave a little bit of an introduction of how my journey started. So I've been in the healthcare space for a while, more in the clinical trial space, pharmaceutical space. So 180 from what I'm doing right now. But my journey was propelled by personal health experience. I went through some health challenges, and because I knew how to navigate the healthcare space well from my background, I decided that, it was just really hard to navigate the preventative part of it. I resorted to Facebook groups, Google searches, I don't know if you've all done that, asking friends, all types of things just to get care from me. And it took a long time. It impacted my family. It was a mess. And so once I got better, I'm not a tech person, I'm more a healthcare person, but once I got better, I just thought there has to be a solution using technology that can solve that problem, because there were some dark, deep days for me that I just couldn't crawl out of, physically, mentally, everything. And so when I was of mindset, here we are. So that's my journey. And you have one already.
Pass it back. Okay, great, it works. All right, so for me, there's like 2 parts to it. The first part was when I transitioned from the corporate world to becoming a financial advisor, because I worked under a division of Desjardins where you are technically self-employed and you can even incorporate and you own your book of business. And the reason why I transitioned from the corporate world to that is because I was just over the corporate world, right? Am I right? So I had a family member who was at Desjardins, and she just brought me in, and I worked on her book, and I grew my own book of business concurrently. And I could have been happy and cushy, and like over the years, I call it slow money. It's like you grow the book over time. But then 3 years in, around 2018, I started noticing some disturbing patterns, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, right? So the clients I serve are mostly women of color, Black women, South Asian women, and women in general, and people of color. And I noticed, one trend I noticed, number one, was that wages weren't keeping up with the cost of living. Like when I was graduating from university, I made $37,000 a year at my first corporate job as a coordinator, and rent at Yonge and Davisville, so Midtown Toronto, was like $789 for a studio. Yeah, $789. Yes, I know, exactly. And now, when you fast forward, right? When you fast forward now, before I left the corporate world, our coordinator at that time, I was a manager, our coordinator at that time, she was making $34,000 a year. And at that time, rent for a studio in core Toronto was at $1,300 a month, right? It's like that's the perfect illustration of wages staying flat over the past generation and a half and the cost of living going up, right? So that means even if you're getting a degree in something that's outside of, like, say, STEM or law, it was really hard to keep up with the cost of living. And so I would have young people or people in their 20s or 30s come to me and say, I have my degree, I got this job, now I would like to pay down my student loan, I'd like to go on vacation, and I'd like to have savings and eventually buy a property. And I got kind of sick of gaslighting them, saying, you just need to budget, right? That's total, no, it's not your fault, anyways. And so I really got sick of it. But then I would notice the clients who were thriving were either self-employed or had a really good side hustle. And I'll never forget one of my clients that I took over, he walked in, he's white, Italian-American. He walked in like greasy overalls, and he kind of smelled like cigarette smoke, but he was kind of like sweet and sheepish. He walked in, and everybody was ignoring him. And then finally, I was like, "Hi, can I help you?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "My advisor left. I don't know who my new one is. Can you help me?" And I'm like, "Of course." So I brought him in. It turns out that he had like a multi-million-dollar portfolio. So he transferred everything to me. Right? So I managed his money. But that went to show that I was like, this entrepreneurship thing. So he had a pavement company, right? That his father started, and he took over and grew it even more. And then I just started noticing that the clients who had shmoney were self-employed in some respect. And so I was like, okay, there's something to this entrepreneurship thing. And then when you combine that with the fact that it was clear as day that technology, which was eating our lives, was becoming more and more biased. Around that time in 2018, I read an article saying that, and I tell this story a lot, so you've probably heard it from me, TM, right, was that in Silicon Valley, they were testing self-driving cars, but the car, I won't say which company, but the cars kept driving through the cutouts, like the dark cutouts of people. They were also driving through, like they couldn't see, cutouts that were supposed to be like people, like a parent pushing a stroller, which meant that the technology didn't recognize that there was something there, right? Because they weren't taking into account the different shapes and sizes living people could come in, right? And I was like, oh, that's scary. And that's because if you saw the documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma, you get 50 designers that all are between 25 and 35 and white. They only hang out with each other because they're in Silicon Valley. Eventually, that's what their worldview is, and that's who they design for and build for implicitly, through this implicit bias. And I was like, we need more people that look like me at the table, but I'm not a coder, so what can I do? And I don't want to go back into the corporate world and climb the ladder and try to influence people that way, because I faced so many barriers. So I was like, oh, what if I just, so I was like, who reports to the CEO? Let me just think about it from this level. Who reports to the CEO? I'm like, okay, board of directors. Who is made up of the board of directors? Investors, right? Whether you're a public company or a private company, the CEO is always reporting to investors. That's the boss. I'm like, I'm going to be an investor, right? Duh, I already manage money. I already know the elements of financial stewardship. So, and then around that time in 2018, that's when Airbnb and Uber were starting to talk about IPOing. And again, you notice the same groups of people that are making tons of money off of these IPOs. So I'm like, oh, so much upside. You combine those three things, and I was like, aha, venture capital. And so that is what led me to really understand and want to participate in entrepreneurship, but at the highly scalable level, where not only can I impact everybody's lives, like or we can impact everybody's lives, right, through having a seat at the table, we can also enjoy this upside that we can then trickle down to and trickle across to our communities. And so that's what led me to entrepreneurship and brand.
Where do I start? Okay, how did we get to start Anusio? So I always say that Anusio wasn't supposed to be a company. It was just, I was in a phase. I grew up in, well, if you're Nigerian, your parents will always tell you, go to school, as many degrees, keep stacking them up as many as you can. So that's really what I knew how to do. So bachelor's, master's, you know, but then I also grew up in an entrepreneurial family. But I went back to school to do an MBA from the U of T, Rotman. I realized that a number of us in the program thought that coming back to do an MBA would help us figure out what next we should be doing in our careers, but that's very wrong. That's not what it's designed to do. Well, I realized that much later, and I was in this phase where I was stuck in my career, I hated my job, and it was impacting me health-wise up to the extent that I lost feeling in my fingers and my toes. And the doctors were like, there's nothing wrong with you, your tests are all clean, and it's like, you know, there's something happening in your life, you need to pay more attention, and I'm like, it's my job. And so I was thinking to myself, I have about 12 years of experience. I've done tons of side hustles. I never have one job at any point in time. Like, if they fire me today, I have something else I'm gonna do. So that was the mindset I've always had, but I'm like, I need to find something, not just because of the money, but something that fulfills me. I was at that phase where I needed to be able to make that decision. I was like, there should be a tool to help me do this. How do I recognize the patterns of what I really love doing? How do I recognize the patterns of what I excel at? How do I identify my transferable skills? How do I know what industries to switch to at any point in time? The tools that were available, that are still available to us today is career advisors, coaches. Not everybody can afford a career coach. They're freaking expensive. And again, you cannot guarantee that you're gonna get the outcome you want because they also have a blind spot. They don't see the 360 data about you to be able to give you that guidance. So I'm like, there has to be something out there. So I was just researching, nothing. I'm like, it's not that difficult. We have AI. This was still like the early days of AI. I'm like, yeah, 2019, we didn't have ChatGPT, you know, all. I'm like, there has to be a way to use this. So I didn't study computer science, or I am not a coder either. But now I roll with the big boys in tech. I can speak the language. But anyways, that was how it started. And I was just tinkering around with the tool. And I spoke with my brother about it. Like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, I just need a tool to be able to help me do this. And this is what the user journey should be like. You know, what do you think about it? And he was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. He built my first AI model. I tested it on myself, and that was how I switched to product management. I did not go to any boot camp for product management. People that do product management courses, I have more experience in product than they have from those boot camps. So I'm like, okay, if I could do this, maybe other people might need it. You know, that was what my brother was trying to tell me. I'm like, I don't think so. I'm the only one with like 2 master's degrees who's confused about her career. And he was like, I don't think so. He also has a PhD, so we know how to study, write exams in our house. So that's like a thing. So he was like, you should check this out. So he did a Google form. And within 2 weeks, we had about 500 people sign up on that form. Like, if you have this solution, we need it. That was the first validation. I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's something here. And that was how we started, you know, the journey of Anusio and doing more research to understand how people are experiencing the problem. And I realized, you know, the problem starts way down, even from high school. How do you channel a path that's going to be fulfilling and lucrative, and you can keep upskilling as you go, and not taking on tons of student loans, going back to school, taking on more courses that did not lead anywhere. So that's how we started.
Amazing. Let's put our hands together for our panelists. I think you guys all have very unique individual experiences, and of course, I think it's always so interesting when your starting point is from like a personal story, right? And then you're able to really build that connection to like your product, your customers, and like just what the solution that you're building. So thank you for sharing that. My next question actually is in two parts, but I'll ask the first part first. So as we've understood today, entrepreneurship can be very difficult, right? So it can be very challenging on all aspects in terms of the business side, but also how you really balance it with like your personal life. My first question to you, all four of you, is what are some of the values that help you through this journey in terms of making the tough decisions? Yeah. Or we can start the other, I don't know. Giselle?
Values. First, I would say transparency. And in terms of transparency, and it cuts across transparency with my team in terms of, okay, if you're just joining us, whether you're a contractor, whatever you are, this is what we do, this is how we work, this is how much time it's going to take. Like, we pretty much just lay it down on the table. If I don't have money to pay, I'm going to tell you, I don't have money to pay you, but this is the plan we have. Like, just being transparent, and I realized that has helped us to get a team of people who I'm so confident to say that they're even more passionate about the problem than I am. Because sometimes I see them working long hours and I'm trying to get them offline. They're like, no, I need to get this thing done and it has to be working by tomorrow. So being transparent has really helped. And then the next thing is integrity and accountability. Like, I try to build that culture because we all work remotely. Like, it's not a case of this is not my problem, this is not my space. We all contribute to the same vision. So sharing that vision and making sure that they can see where we want to go and own every aspect of it, watch out for each other. And sometimes life happens and a team member needs to be away. How can we make sure that we can keep the ship moving until they are able to come back to us? And then just being very 100% focused on the data. And I say that because we've had instances where, like Erica was saying earlier, you're going to get tons of advice that could lead you astray. I've had people tell me, like, this should not be a business. I'm like, okay. Nobody wants this. I'm like, we have over 2,000 people on the wait list as of last count. Like, should I be listening to you or should I be following the data and pivoting as needed? So just being sometimes, yes, we see the big picture, but just sometimes trying to be very focused on what's at hand and what needs to be done. And I'm grateful that I have access to, like, the community that has helped me get this far. Like, from getting the first check from Nobalom and then DMZ and then, pushing it up from just an idea, getting into the BEA, Black Entrepreneurship Alliance at Y-Space, and now the Black Founders Network. Like, it's just been a strong, reinforcing community that just has kept us going. So I think those are the key values that I would say we eschew.
Okay. Giselle, do you want to go?
Yeah, let's go. So this borders on values and tactics too, just practical stuff. There's so much talk about building an area where you have passion. And for me, it was yes, but couple that with where you have an edge or where you have some level of either experience, edge, whatever it is. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a skill set, but how everybody has a story here talking about never meant for it to be a business, turned into a business. There's a conversation you're gonna have with yourself about whether or not you have the internal fortitude and the risk tolerance to go through that step. So that's knowing who you are, and that in itself is a skill. If you could just be you talk about transparency. Everything you tell other people publicly, whether it's investors, team members, family members, and I'll talk about the family piece specifically and how you have to train your family. And it sounds crazy, but you actually have to train those around you. But everybody's so focused on what we say outwardly, but what are you actually saying in your head? What are the quiet discussions you're having in your head? What are the thoughts you're having in your head? Because you can say whatever you want, publicly to other people and make it sound good. You can practice your pitch, sales pitch, all the things. But what's happening inside of your head? Like, what are you talking, what's that inner dialogue you're having with yourself? So as much as this is a discussion about values, it's like that discussion, that inner dialogue is probably the most important dialogue. I'd put it right at the top. Mm-hmm. That's the most important dialogue, because you can fake it outwardly, but internally, that's what's actually going to drive your decision making, your ability to keep going, what you tell your team members and the investors. That will drive it first and foremost before anything else. Again, so you can fake it to I think there's value in faking it to you, making it, practicing all the things, all that outer dialogue. But internally, I think that's at the top of the list. What goes with that is our support system, whether it's family, friends, team members, et cetera, et cetera. When I say we need to train them, not from like a disrespectful standpoint, but a level of transparency where for you to build anything from the ground up, like that is your baby. I know there's a lot of conversations about, wanting a soft life and work-life balance. Listen, I'm not telling you that you have to like bust your ass for the rest of your life, but I'm suggesting to you that if you haven't gone down the path of building something, you're about to bust your ass for a good period of time. And that means educating everybody around you to say, hey, I'm gonna set aside this block of time once a week or once a month. It might be once a month, it might be once a quarter. It doesn't matter what time you set aside, but put a block of time aside and commit to that. They'll be okay with you giving half an hour of your time. They might not initially, but you have to put those guardrails around, because if you don't, emotions start to flare, people have unexpected, it's not that, the expectations of the people around you, they don't know how to move around you. They don't know how to be around you. They don't know how to support you. So you literally have to say, hey, here's my time for you. And you have to stick to that. And no matter what you do, what other work you have, you need to commit to that time. So start off with a small amount of time, let's say once a quarter. Make a list of the people that really count in your life. Stick to that list. Do not stray from that list. And I think that's the only way to create like boundaries around what you call a support system. So I'd say those are the two things that I'd focus on.
Perfect. I think for the sake of time, if you guys can just...
Yep, I'll keep it short.
Great.
I'll keep it short. Wrap it up, yeah. That was a good skit on us, and I love it. Yeah, I love that skit. So for me, it's been my community. He said that, like DMZ included. This journey is wild, and it's wild. I was sleeping in the car, just like, I don't recommend that, but it's wild. It's not for everybody. But my community, my advocates who believe in me, even if I mess up horribly, has been my success. People who, at the core, know who I am. They know I'll deliver. I may not deliver how people want it, but then I'll bring it. So, and I have a few people who are on that team, so I'm thankful for them. As well is courage and belonging. Belonging is here. So this, I think, for anyone who's starting out, being in a space like this gives you courage. When I first started, I'm from the pharma space, so I would walk into a room where no one looked like me. I'm kind of used to that. But I can imagine someone who's not used to this space trying to build something and not seeing themselves. I think that having courage and belonging helps with challenges, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got it. All right, I'll keep this super brief so that as much as possible. So two things. Number one is understanding that you really truly have to understand and believe that we're all equal. Nobody's above or better than you. And I catch myself all the time because of how we're trained in society. I'll give you a little story. And Nafisa, it'll be 2 seconds, I promise. Okay. Nafisa, she witnessed a lot of it, so she's like, yeah, I remember. And that is that, okay, so long story short, the second value is really having a North Star, because that's gonna keep you going when nothing else will. And my North Star is like literally this moment right here, talking to all of you Black women and allies, right? And the reason why is because back in 2021, some of you know the story, some of you don't, but I was starting another fund. I decided to go out on my own when my colleagues didn't want to move forward. So I got encouraged to move forward with my own fund, and I did. But then I angered, as a result, this like quote unquote powerful 63-year-old white dude, and who then got mad that I had the audacity to start my own fund. And to be fair, I got some of his colleagues to invest in my fund. And so he went to a tech news website and talked a whole bunch of ish about me, and it was published. All right, and so no, it was great. I got my retribution because I confronted the editor-in-chief on stage on the center stage at Collision this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was epic. Anyways, and that was meant. Thank you. That was meant to discourage me back in 2021, right? That the whole point of that was to take me down and prevent me from doing my fund. And I literally cried for 3 days in a row about it. And I'm like, I guess like I have I can't do it because I'm just me, right? Like there's nobody like me that's doing it, etc. And so I almost gave up. But then like 3 days later, I woke up. I'm like, wait a minute. If I give up now, then what message am I sending to other Black women in this space who are either building companies or investing or building funds? I'm like, no way. If not for me, then for all of us. And therefore, I have to keep going because it's bigger than me. So thank you.
Awesome. Amazing. So I think that's that. We have a few more questions, but I think we'll keep it at that. So we have more time to kind of network. If you have questions for our panelists, you can engage with them, while we're nibbling on food and drinks. So I think I want to say thank you all so much for sharing all your nuggets with us and for being so candid. I would like to say again, massive thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I know that it's, work week. We all are wanting to go home, so thank you all for being here. And of course, Regina, thank you for being our, partner in this and putting this event together as well, and Black Women Talk Tech. And of course, also shout out to our team who was really supportive in putting this whole thing together as well. And last but not least, massive shout out to all our speakers
Thanks for
today.
having us. Thank you.
Including Erica. And that's it. Let's mingle. Thank you.
I thought it was going to go like, I thought 30 minutes. Yeah. That was great.